Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Well, here we go. Different. It's also a book cover, and this one's called Whiskers Abroad. Ashi and Audrey's Adventures in Japan. Oh, wait a second. This doesn't give the feel. Maybe it is a non-fiction book, but I kind of get the feeling it's not. It's got three very stylistic, beautiful suitcases of small, descending size, kind of stacked on top of each other. One side has a very kind of stylized, sort of Japanese print with cranes on it. Sitting on the base suitcase is a very nice gray cat. Is this your cat?
No, it's not.
Okay, a nice gray cat. Behind, almost coming out of the cat's ear, is Japan. Kind of like the map of Japan. Not too detailed, but you can sort of see. And then the background is kind of like a map, so it gives like this feeling of adventure, and it's like a map of kind of slice of Asia. And so tell us about Whiskers Abroad.
So I did not write this book, but I am publishing this book.
Oh, okay.
So
right, because it says written by Carrie Carter.
Right. Besides being an author myself, I also have this micro press that I run. Carrie Carter is my latest author, and she wrote this wonderful book called Whiskers Abroad, Ashi's and Audrey's Adventures in Japan. So as a publisher, I set out what areas I wanted to work in. So travel, international affairs, history, and anything to do with Houston. So
Okay.
Carrie Carter walked across my transom, and here she is, and her book meets 2 of the 4 categories. I read it, and it is so hilarious.
Okay.
The way it's written is a writer is invited to go to Japan to write a magazine article. And she goes, but she takes her cat with her. So her cat's name is Ashi. So the book is arranged every day of their trip. The writer, whose name is Audrey, she gives her recounting of what happened that day. And then the cat tells you what really happened. And it's like, you can't believe the difference between these 2 versions of what happened. The cat is so funny, saying, every day he's saving the woman from sure disaster. He's rescuing her. He's her cat in shining armor. And the things just the craziness that she has or she does, it's so funny. But to answer your first comment, you're absolutely right. When I first got this book, I thought, how am I going to classify this? Is it fiction? Well, yeah, a cat can't write and talk. But it's also nonfiction, because the information about Japan that you get as you read the book is fabulous. It's fabulous for a first-time person going to Japan. What should I see? What should I do? Where should I go? So it's both nonfiction and fiction. And so we talked about it a while and worked on it, and we call it a travel log, which is really what it is. Kind of in the mode of what, for example, Mark Twain used to do when he would do these travel books. They were part real and part made up. And that's what this book is.
When I saw it, I, for some reason, made the connection to Haruki Murakami. In Murakami's books, he always has a cat, right? And the thing about Murakami, which is great, is that I think most of the Japanese books that I've read tend to be kind of traditional, very kind of mired in tradition, in the history of the great Japan. Whereas Murakami, it's like today, guy's got a jazz bar, and it's very contemporary. And so then, as you're telling me about kind of what it's like, you've got the cat. I could totally see how somebody writing who has a flair for this could really, because to go traveling with your cat is itself kind of peculiar. I love it. It's really funny.
Right. And the other thing, for me, it's so interesting. My son has been telling me for years, Mom, you should write a graphic novel, which I don't think is my skill set. But this book is not a graphic novel, but it is heavily visual.
Right.
We have a designer, Stacy Vickers, and she is incredible. I mean, every page is a visual delight. Nice. So, and you see Audrey and you see Ashi, the cat, and they're in Japan, and you're going, how did she get these images?
Oh,
How
wow.
did she get these images? And so, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful to look at, just to
Yeah.
look at.
How do people get this book?
Well, it's not even out yet. It's up for pre-sale on
Oh,
Amazon.
you're just teasing us.
Well, we at first I thought we were going to launch it in June, and then we
Okay.
decided to delay it a little bit so we could give it more pre-sale publicity. So it's up on Amazon now for sale,
Nice. Nice.
and we're giving it a special pre-sale price to try to boost the number of people that'll buy it and then start spreading it. Because I
Sure.
promise you, anybody that reads this book is going to love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's got so
Oh.
much going for it. I mean, they're the cat lovers. They're the
Yeah,
people who
yeah.
are who like travel. They're the people who want to learn about Japan. It's
Yeah.
just, it hits so many things that people can love about it.
This person who gets some training in creative writing suddenly realizes, wait a second, I need a career, goes into the foreign service, becomes a diplomat, travels the world, comes back to the US, does all of these highly focused, supportive programs to help women also kind of develop however they will. And then you kind of go through this thing to write a book, you write your book, and then you decide to be, this, I'm assuming this is the sequence, and then you decide to be a book publisher. How do you explain that evolution?
See, for me, it's a circle. Remember I said I started out thinking I was going to be a writer,
Yeah.
and then I went through this career, and then I retired, and I'm back to being a writer.
Mm.
The additional piece, besides just me going through what I, continuing to do what I always did, writing, but now doing it myself as opposed for the government, is there's been a revolution in the publishing industry, just like there's been a revolution for newspapers. All of those newspapers that have folded, now we're down to 4 or 5 really big newspapers in the US, and that's it.
Yeah.
The same thing has happened in publishing. Of all the publishing houses that used to exist, there are 4 really big New York publishers now. But there's been an explosion of small presses and independent presses. And so when I realized that if I wanted to go with a traditional New York publisher, it was going to be at least 3 years by the time you find an agent, and then the agent places your book, and then they edit your book, and then they do advanced marketing. That's a minimum is 3 years.
And it gets a window of about 1 to 2 months of actual promotion, and then
That's correct. And that's if they accept your book, which there's no guarantee. So I said, I'm too old. I can't wait 3 years for this to happen. So I went to start learning about another route. And the new route, of course, is because of printing and digital printing and printing on demand, you don't have to go through a big press. You can go through a small press. And so I'm learning all these things. I'm taking courses on publishing. I'm finding out about publishing. And then it occurs to me, I'm spending more time learning than I really ever planned on. But if I have to do it for me, I might as well offer this to other people as well.
right.
So that's when I said, okay, I'm going to be a publisher.
You're such a mensch.
The thing is, I have absolutely bad timing, though, because I opened my micropress, which is what I call it, right before COVID hit.
Okay, now I would like you to do a little thought experiment. Think about all of the people on the planet. All of them having, in their month, aspirations or dreams to do something. Some of them are, ambitious, and maybe most of them are not. And pretty much everybody I've talked to said, and then the pandemic happened, and that just changed everything. Like with you. But here you are, like whiskers abroad. Look at that. It's amazing.
So the interesting thing for me is because of the pandemic, because I couldn't do what I thought I was going to be doing, which was go to a lot of book festivals and go out and be marketing my book in person. I couldn't do that. I was trapped at home. But that led to me, my first book, Savoring the Camino, for example, I made it into an audiobook, which I would
nice.
never have done otherwise.
You reading or somebody else reading?
Well, somebody else reading, but
Okay.
it's a whole process to find your narrator and then work
Yeah.
with them to get your audiobook up. Anyway, I thought I would only have originally the paperback and an ebook, but I ended up with those two plus the audiobook plus a hardback, which I never planned to do. I wouldn't have done except I had the time to work on that during the pandemic. And the second book I wrote, it was a pandemic project. I would never have done that. because I already knew what I wanted my second book to be, and it wasn't this. But for my second book, I had to travel. Couldn't travel
Right.
during COVID. So I did something else. And so I came up with a book which I never planned to do. And I also have, I started writing short stories. Again, going back to my beginning, that's what I did.
Okay.
And I submitted them to different competitions. And four of my stories then went into story anthologies.
Nice.
And that's another area I would never have explored except for the pandemic. So
Fantastic.
I kept myself busy.
So just to kind of weave in the little bits that I can. So I was super science oriented. And then I did this one course in the college in the short story. And then the professor read, a short story from Anton Chekhov. And that one class completely changed my whole thinking and essentially rechanneled my life. So how do we tie all this back to raising awareness of what it is to be a diplomat?
Tie it all back. Well, I think people should think of a diplomat as being their eyes and ears overseas. As I said, the first line of defense, we let people know, should you go to Israel right now? Is it a good time to visit Israel? Because we post travel warnings, travel
Right.
advisories. And if you contact the embassy, they will tell you what they think the
Or
situation
Hong
is.
Kong.
Or Hong Kong, wherever. And we feed all that information back to the American public through websites, our embassy websites, but also through the Department of State.
Mm.
So I continue, I think, to be eyes and ears, but about the whole world.
Right.
So I think I mentioned earlier, I was actually scheduled to do a podcast on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine to talk about my books.
Right.
But I started out talking about Ukraine
Yeah.
and about the importance for the world of what was going on. And most Americans at that point still really didn't understand what was happening.
Okay, so Ukraine happens, my head explodes. I've been trying to have more people connected to the Ukraine on the podcast, and I've had 2 so far. One of the comments that I heard recently was she thinks, or she proposed that, well, people really notice what's going on in Ukraine because the people there are a lot like us. They're white and they're middle class and whatever. How could this happen over there? I mean, there are so many other conflicts that we could also be paying attention to. But I've also read and felt the analysis that this is actually a very different kind of conflict. So feeding from your experience. Oh, you got me riled up. Feeding from your experience, how would you say, or is the what happened in Ukraine different, or is it a watershed moment? Is it what people think it is?
Yes, it is a watershed moment. Starting at the end of World War II, the United States, working with its allies, created a world order, a system, a framework for international affairs. And because of that framework that was created, there have been no major wars in Europe since 1945.
Yeah.
This framework established peace in Europe. And now, because of Ukraine, the framework has been challenged.
Yeah.
And if Russia wins, it will be essentially shattered.
Right.
So who knows what the future will bring? Do we go back to great power rivalry as we had in past centuries, or Germany might fight France, or Germany fight Russia, or who knows? The Russians have said, we do not accept the current world system. Now, although that world system was very effective in Europe, it was less effective in other parts of the world for various reasons, but still, for many years, we haven't had another world war.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of regional wars, a lot of smaller wars, but it's kept us from a world war. And Russia is trying to break that system.
Yeah. And I know that's a very difficult question. And I know that we have to move on to the next photograph. I wish my podcast isn't at this stage where it's kind of like video and audio, but you have a warmth to your smile and your face that comes to me through the audio. And yeah, like I really appreciate your time. Wow, I feel like I'm at the table with a master. This is great.
Well, thank you, Ben. I love my career, my diplomatic career, and I love my current work in writing. So I'm glad that my enthusiasm about both areas comes through, even just in an audio presentation.
Oh, for sure it does. Let's go to the next photo. So, is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So, if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.